everyone, my name is Bobby Shortle, and I'm here with Nick Rocco Scalia, and we are the Intrepid Filmographers. Every miniseries, we chart a course through the full filmography of an underdiscussed genre or journeyman filmmaker. In this expedition, we do our best to try and be explorers, using our years of film knowledge to help guide us, but always being open to discovering new things about the medium we love so much. We are currently embedded in the films of Karyn Kusama, but we finished all her films, yet we are not ready to let her go just yet. So we are covering her short film, Her Only Living Son, and the pilot of Yellowjackets. Nick, how's your team spirit today?
It's pretty good.
It's pretty
also,
good.
I've been eating a lot of human flesh lately, and it is great. Highly underrated.
Yummy, 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 yummy. So here we go. We've come to the end of our Karyn Kusama miniseries. We kind of did our wrap up on her last week and talked about how we would rank her films and how we felt about it in general. So today we just kind of get to sit back, not a lot of pressure to talk about the overall sort of trajectory of career, just talk about a couple of smaller in length projects that she has done. One is Her Only Living Son, which was a short film as part of a anthology horror series called XX, one that was directed by all women, and also the pilot of the Showtime original series Yellowjackets that she directed, and she executive produces that show. So, Nick, let me ask you, we'll do Yellowjackets second and the short first. Does that sound like a good idea?
I think that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
So I will tell you, I was watching the short, and I don't want to look. Let's set the idea of what the short is, right? Like I said, it's part of an anthology collection, much like your VHSs, you know, those type of movies, which are a group. I'm saying in the modern sense, creep show. There's a huge lineage of these horror anthology series.
Well, not just horror. I was going to actually what I compared it to more was New York Stories or Four Rooms, which I recently tried to watch, and I only made it through the first two segments. I never even got to the Tarantino one that I think is the closer there. But yeah, you get like a group of like-minded filmmakers together or something. New York Stories was Woody Allen, Francis Ford Coppola, and I'm blanking on who the third one was. There was three segments there, but it's like that's a little harsh on Coppola. Maybe I don't know. The truth hasn't come out yet.
No, you're right. That is a little harsh on Coppola. You're right. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely
Woody Allen,
right.
100% a sex pest.
Yes, absolutely.
Coppola, the jury's still out, kind of, sort of. Yeah. But I will say, this kind of reminded me of those movies where you bring together filmmakers just for, to have them all have this little thing in their filmography for their fans or whatever, and you can advertise that it's their movie, and on IMDb they'll say they directed it, but really it's just a short film, kind of a one-off sort of thing.
Well, I was trying to speak to maybe people who currently watch a lot of movies and maybe would know what know what one of these movies was. And
are you saying nobody knows New York Stories?
I don't think many people know New York Stories. People may know Four Rooms. Tarantino obviously famously directing one of those, Robert Rodriguez. But
man, those first two segments were so bad. Biggest Tim Roth fan in the world. Really like Robert Rodriguez. Really like they're the last two, and I never even made it to their shorts. I saw the Allison Anders one, which was terrible, and the Alexander Rockwell one, which was even worse. And then I was like, I can't do it. I got to give up.
I mean, I bring up also the VHS thing more in the way that it is lesser known filmmakers a lot of the time, right? There are a lot of times people getting their first bite at the apple in these VHS collections, or they've been gone for a while and they're coming back, et cetera, et cetera. This is similar, right? Other than Kusama, not established filmmakers' names who you'd even know. Kusama would be the most household name of all the filmmakers, and she's not a household name, right? So,
yeah, well, St. Vincent, but she's not a name as a filmmaker.
Right. She's a very famous recording artist, obviously, and performer. So this is a collection of 4 shorts that are unrelated and are stitched together by this stop motion interstitials. This entire thing, I think, cost a little over $1 million to make. It's extremely low budget production. So when I say what I'm going to say about it, which is some negative stuff, I want to couch it in the fact that There was obviously a lot of limitations going on here in making these things. And I don't think either one of us watched any of the other movies except Kusama's, right?
We didn't, which is that terrible of us?
No, we're not doing a mini series on those other directors right now. We're doing a mini series on Kusama.
To watch 1/4 of a movie, I don't know. I mean, it's like the way you described it as a short was a better way of describing it. Yeah, like if this was a standalone thing, that would have made sense. I will say, I mean, you know, I hadn't heard of the other filmmakers. This does sound like something. I love horror movies. I love anthology films. Although I remember like notoriously bad reviews for this, and I looked it up, and they weren't actually that bad now. But it was like the AV Club or somewhere. Like when this came out, I was like, oh, that sounds cool. Like 4 female horror directors, new anthology short thing. I like the VHS movies. I subject myself to those every year. They're not always great, but there's been some great segments in them. And so I was kind of pumped for this. And then the review was so brutal. And I think it was mostly because of the St. Vincent segment that I was like, I'm probably just not going to bother, which I should have because I like The Invitation so much. But I never saw it up until now. And what's kind of interesting about this is the first writing credit Kusama has since Girl Fight, I want to say.
Yeah, I think so. Yes, it is the first.
I mean, not that there's a whole lot going on in this script. It certainly isn't developed to the extent that Girl Fight is, but just to get a sense of Kusama as a writer, it's got some moments in it.
Yeah. So the name of her short, as I said at the opening at the top, is Her Only Living Son. And it is probably around 20 minutes long. And it tells the story of a mother and her son who's on the eve of his 18th birthday. And her son is acting incredibly strangely, aggressively, getting in trouble at school. And she can tell something is off. But it seems like even the town around her is unwilling to accept the fact that the thing is wrong. In fact, it's very right.
We need to talk about Kevin, even though his name is Andy.
Exactly.
Sorry.
Yes. And I will say, so we'll kick this off. What did you think overall of the short, Nick?
I wasn't super impressed by it, particularly knowing what Kusama is capable of. It is a smaller thing. It's a minor project and was kind of designed to be one. I mean, what it basically is kind of a riff on Rosemary's Baby, I guess. Like it kind of takes a lot of the ideas from that movie and it's just like, what would happen 18 years later, right? And I know I didn't see it, but I know there's a prequel to Rosemary's Baby that came out this year, Apartment 7A, I think it's called.
Yes.
So I guess if you watch that and then the original Rosemary's Baby and then this, it can form a nice little trilogy for you.
I mean, you could do that with several movies. You could do that with the first Omen, then the Omen, and then this.
Yeah. But it's not, it's kind of an unofficial sequel, I guess you could call it. But it does. I mean, it clearly is inspired by that and clearly has a lot to do with that. Can I ask, just for starters here, do you like that movie, Rosemary's Baby? I know it's a classic and there's other Polanski films talk about your sex pests. There's some other stuff that he's done that I think is like a million times better. Like, how do you feel about that movie?
First of all, tough to talk about Roman Polanski in any sort of creative way, but
I said it. I got it out of the way.
I haven't watched that movie in a very long time. I think I watched it when I was my early 20s or late teens, being like, this is one of the horror movies that you're supposed to watch. So I watched it. And I think at the time I wasn't ready for it to be, mostly a sort of domestic drama sandwiched around with some horror stuff. It takes a long time to get going. It is a deliberately paced movie, right?
It makes your A24 horror look like the fastest paced thing you've ever seen.
Yes, exactly.
Makes it look like a Saw movie.
So I do not have, I think, the ability at 41 to give you like a real review of Rosemary's Baby. It is on my Shocktober list this year for exactly this reason, because I want to rewatch it and reform an opinion about it or have an actual opinion about it. I was always of the mind back then of being like a little bit more in that I can appreciate why this is a classic, but I don't really feel the things that I think I'm supposed to feel, because that's one of those movies where your parents are like, it is the scariest thing you're ever going to see. It is one of those movies that I think for the generation before us was, seismic. And I think for me watching when I watched it, it didn't really affect me that much.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the same thing about it. Like, I had the opposite. I came to The Exorcist later in life. So, to me, that was that generation's horror movie. And they said it was the scariest thing ever. And when I saw it, I was pretty much on board with that. Like that was the one that really sort of held up really well. And I think I watched Rosemary's Baby later. I was probably in my early 20s also, and knew the reputation that it had. But yeah, I never found it to be, either one of the better Polanski films, one of the better sort of religious horror movies. It is, I mean, I don't mind slow paced. I do enjoy a slow paced horror movie. It does have some neat, like psychedelic dream sequence stuff that I liked a lot. But other than that, I just kind of felt like there wasn't a lot of there. So, I think I was already sort of predisposed knowing what this was, like, kind of an unofficial short sequel to a movie that I never found all that impressive to begin with. I wasn't going into this with real high hopes for it.
I will say, now you actually sparked my memory. I saw Rosemary's Baby probably right after I saw The Exorcist for the first time, which I saw The Exorcist for the first time when they re-released it in theaters for that 20th anniversary or whatever it was. Yep. That's the first time I ever saw it. So,
which shame on us.
Well, yeah, but how old was I? How old were we when that came out? Like 18?
Yeah, 18. It was one of the first
17,
movies my wife and I
18?
saw in theaters together when we were dating.
I had never seen it.
Nothing more romantic.
No, beautiful romantic film. I saw it and I loved it. I was like crazy for it. And then that's when I was like, okay, I should watch other movies from the 70s that people put into this category of movies, and Rosemary's Baby was one of those movies. I have always, and it's a much junkier movie, always enjoyed The Omen more than Rosemary's Baby.
The Omen's a lot of fun.
It's just a lot of fun. It's a very fun horror movie. I totally understand it's not a high art movie, but it's Donner doing what Donner does his best.
It doesn't take itself so bloody seriously as Rosemary's Baby does. And I think I appreciate that. But I mean, The Exorcist takes itself pretty seriously too.
Yeah,
but
very
it's seriously. Also really, really good. Like I think it earns that. Whereas, I mean, this is not about Rosemary's Baby. We're not talking Polanski. We're never going to do him on the show.
Something though, Nick.
Are you saying there's kind of not much going on in Her Only Living Son?
Film. It's a short. That's one of the tough stuff about talking about these kind of movies, right? Is that I don't want to be hard on it like I would be hard on a feature length film that had the attention that a feature length film would get, right? But this wasn't released online. This was put into a package and expected for people to pay for it and watch it, right? So I think it deserves a critical eye. And I think that my main issues with it, right, are, so the story, like I said, is woman has a son. He's turning 18. He seems like he's the son of the devil, right? And the whole town, seems like the whole town around her, almost the whole town is basically devil worshippers who are
they're there to support him no matter what he does, right? So that's actually my favorite thing about it was that idea, because I know like one of the few things I remember about Rosemary's Baby is like that's what the people in the apartment complex were doing, right? Like everyone was sort of there so that she could have this spawn of Satan child and to support its birth, its genesis, its gestation, whatever. And so this movie is like, what if those people, like, how are they going to take care of him as he grows up and kind of goes on through life? And the 18th birthday. I mean, there's some nice sort of thematic stuff going on here. And I like the idea that the first time we sort of, I mean, you can tell the relationship between the kid and his mother is a little bit contentious and she doesn't really understand him. But, he's a 17, almost 18-year-old boy. She's a single mom. And that's sort of understandable just on its own terms. But then he brutally assaults a classmate and she gets called in to the principal's office, and the other, the girl's mom, that he ripped her fingernails out. There's a lot of fingernail stuff in this, which I found kind of effective. I was cringing during that scene later on. Pretty good. Yeah,
for sure. Yes.
I mean, it's a cheap shock, but not a bad cheap shock. But I thought that was a really interesting scene and not really something I'd seen before where, particularly in this era, right, where schools are really sensitive to violence and things like that, where this poor girl's mother's in there. It's like, aren't you going to suspend him or expel him? Like, no, we just think he needs some time or something like that. And the mom's like, I'm going to sue you. And they're like, we don't care.
Yeah.
And then they bring Andy's mom, into they talk to her privately and they're like, he's very special and we're looking out for him and all that. And I thought that scene was really good. I mean, as far as the writing in this and the direction of it, that was a really interesting moment. I mean, there's not much else really aside from the fingernail ripping out stuff later. I mean, it gives away its twist, if there is a twist, pretty quickly. but it's a unsettling scene where you have I think it's the principal and the counselor who are basically telling this kid's mom, no, it's okay that he's violent and a horrible person. We're gonna just see how this goes, and don't you worry about him. He's very special.
So I think my problems aren't necessarily the writing. I think actually the writing isn't bad. It's pretty solid. I think one of the things that I have a problem with the writing is, and this happens in short films quite a bit, is it's trying to do too much. It's trying to set up too much of a world without the time to do it. You get that beginning scene, which is sort of like a flashback that kind of sets up where we are. And then they're trying to fill in this whole sort of story of the town. And, she gives like a monologue about, how he was born. And there's just a little bit too much trying to get all the story out so you understand what's going on.
Well, there's a mailman who's like the most important supporting character in this, who kind of tells us everything. And he, aside from the principal and the counselor that we see in that one scene, like he's the only representative of this town full of people that's there to support the Satan spawn as he turns 18, whatever. So yeah, like he kind of stands in for everyone. So it's a very small world.
Yeah, absolutely. My two biggest problems with this short are one on Kusama. I guess they're both kind of Kusama because she's the director and writer, right? She's the fully in control of this. One is I just feel, unlike everything else she's done that we've talked about, there isn't a lot of style to this thing. Like the shot composition, the lighting, all of that stuff is just very flat, very basic to me. And she's usually so good at those things, right? And I'm not even, some of that is obviously budget and time, right? Obviously these things are shot very quickly for very little amount of money in very closed off environments. But most of this takes place at the house. And I feel like everything in the house is, if you had told me this was an entry into a short film festival by someone who has been making short films for a couple of years, but has never made a feature and is just sort of doing it with their friends sort of vibe, but is good at it, but is doing it with their friends, I would believe you, right? There's just, there is a lot you can do with placement of lights and stuff like that is not very time consuming and not very expensive. That could have been done here, I think, to make these things a little more interesting. Like that scene in the office, the school office that you were talking about, because they have a very singular light source there, it looks pretty nice, I would say, and it has some style to it. But the rest of it feels extremely flat to me. I don't know how you felt about the way it looked.
I actually disagree with that a little bit. I kind of liked the look at this to sort of like...
Really? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I see what you're saying. It definitely, the budget shows a little bit. And I'm sure this was made for like a couple of days, right?
Yes, of course.
Within like a couple of days. So there's not a lot of time to really get elaborate with it. But this sort of like congealed late afternoon sunlight that kind of lights every scene in the house, this like, kind of gritty looking suburbia thing that it's doing. I don't mind that, actually. Like, I think that suits the story really nicely. My biggest problem with it is just there's scenes here that are not particularly directed well. They're what's going on in them is not articulated really wonderfully. So the ending of this is just like kind of a shrug. It just kind of, it's done with a little bit of lighting and stuff like that. But like, I actually had to go on Wikipedia and look up like what actually happens in the closing scene of this. And thankfully someone took the time to write up a pretty good summary of this little short from XX on Wikipedia. So thank you.
And what did they say was what happened at the end?
Yeah. So the decision is like the son decides he's going to not be bad, and basically he and the mom embrace and somehow kill each other, which if he's going to do that, why kill her too?
Yeah, I don't know that again.
But like there's some flashing light on both of their faces, and then they kind of both collapse on the floor and they're bleeding, and then the short ends, and I was like, okay, let's see the next shot, and then we cut back to the interstitial, the stop motion thing. And it really doesn't seem to make a lot of sense, and it's like that decision is not really set up at all in the story. Like we have no sense up to that point that maybe he does have a choice of whether he wants to go on being the Antichrist or whatever he is. And yeah, I don't know. I found that to just be very weak, and it's an interesting idea, but like a better film would have set that up better and would have shown that in a way where it just kind of played more would have just played, I guess.
Yeah, I think, again, just feels like a lot of shorts that you see where it's like, I don't know, like, how are we going to end this? The characters die. And that's an ending.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, like that, no one can disagree. That's an ending. You know, there can't be anything after it. I think that, like you said, kind of feeds into what I was saying, which is make this thing more focused, right? Make this thing about the idea that he has a choice to make when he turns 18, and we're pushing towards that choice, and use all of your time to tell that, right? Don't try to do such a far-ranging story where I feel like you are almost trying to fit in, you know, a feature length amount of information into 20 minutes. Like the mailman has a whole arc where he's like, oh, I'm the nice, friendly mailman who wants to date you because I'm really nice.
Out once a year. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, you know, 5 minutes later, he's like, Hail Satan.
So it gets pretty close to that. Yeah. It's pretty histrionic. Yeah, it's like the son character, who is very important and very interesting, gets kind of shortchanged. And I know what Karyn Kusama is going for. She is a feminist filmmaker. I think over the course of the films we've talked about, like, she is singularly focused on female characters. But because the mom's story is not that interesting, and she doesn't really have that much to do here either. You know, she discovers some things that we already know about, and that's really the entire journey that she goes on. And then, you know, I guess it's sort of her thing. Like, she convinces him to not be Satan's son, or to kill himself before he attains his full power or whatever. We never get a sense of how that works, really. I mean, I don't know. Like, my feeling about this is that Karyn Kusama is not really into this religious horror stuff. So just kind of like hand waves everything that you would find interesting in one of these, which I'm not either. And it does take a very good one, because I'm not religious. So like something like The Exorcist has to be that good. Otherwise, you know, I'm not going to see the latest Russell Crowe plays an exorcist priest movie.
Well, I mean, that you don't go see that for the religion.
Well, I guess.
You see that because Russell Crowe was like, this guy definitely lives in the hills of wherever, because that's where I want to shoot this movie, and I want to drink a lot of wine.
Like Como or something like that. Sure.
Yeah. And I want to ride a Vespa because I don't want to walk during these roads. But
who knew? Who expected Russell Crowe to get fat and play priest someday?
I mean, I don't know. Russell Crowe probably loves it. I guarantee they did another one that just came out.
No, I know. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. I wasn't just making it. There are multiple Russell Crowe plays in Exorcist priest movies. I know that.
Yeah, which
I haven't seen any of them. Yeah.
No, I haven't, me neither. But
it's just a weird way to typecast him. But yeah, so I'm not really into this stuff, and I can kind of tell she's not really into this stuff either. And because Rosemary's Baby is kind of known as one of these prototypical feminist horror movies, the kind of stuff an A24 would make today, like, I could see how she could see herself doing one of those. But also, like, you do have to kind of give a shit about the genre if you're going to work in genre, and I don't feel like she does.
I think, well, I mean, I don't know why she would have written it if she didn't. You know, it's not like she got assigned this thing.
It's not the most passionate writing she's ever done. Girl Fight feels like that's from the heart. This feels like, I could probably get this done in a weekend.
So I feel like the real stuff that she's interested in, right, are the ideas of
the mother. Like, how do you, the relationship between a mother and a teenage boy, which, as I said, is kind of a fraught relationship anyway. But even that really kind of gets shortchanged here. Like, we don't see much of the two of them together, and it's like, okay, then all we've got is reveals that are not really reveals.
Right. But I don't really think it's even about the relationship with the son as far as them together. I think it's this idea of, and it's explicitly said at the end, which is, your father, right, doesn't get to claim you. He didn't put in the work. It doesn't even matter that he's the devil, right? Forget about the fact that he's the devil. It's this idea that you're
sad that the devil's a deadbeat dad. Yeah.
It's this nature versus nurture sort of conversation between the two of them, right? About how can one overcome the other, and the power of this love and this person to do that. Again, it's like a serious version of Good Omens. I don't know if you've seen Good Omens, the Terry Pratchett, Neil Gaiman, speaking problematic people, miniseries version, the miniseries version of it that came out on Amazon.
Who is not problematic? Joseph Kosinski. No. Kosinski's on a straight and narrow.
As far as we know so far.
Yeah.
So that same idea, which is like, this kid is the son of the devil, But the basis of that story is the son of the devil, and he's supposed to be he's going to be born to this diplomat and his wife. It's supposed to be like very Omen-like, right? And then they're going to place the nanny, this nanny with them, who's going to raise him and teach him about, being the devil. But basically the demon who's on Earth, who's supposed to make sure that this baby goes to the right place, messes up where he goes, and he goes with like this nice country family and grows up. And when he's about to, turn 13, I think it is in that one, it's supposed to be like Judgment Day, and he has to sort of like, it's like a battle for, is he going to give into his worst nature, or is the nurture of his life that he's gone through going to win out because he was raised as a good kid? Basically.
Which sounds like a really interesting story to tell over a multi-episode series like that.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Give me 20 hours to see that play out, not like 20 minutes.
So the other problem with this, and of my two problems, is if you're going to do something this short, if you're going to do something that you really need to have hit really hard, and that obviously is all acting based because you don't have effects or anything like that, little thing you got to do, cast good actors. And I feel like none of these people are up to the task of what this thing is asking them to do, right?
Well, they're also very incongruous, right? Like the actress who plays the mother is playing this very, very serious. Christina Kirk is her name. She looks like a lot of people. She looks like you've seen her in things before, but you probably haven't. I looked up her filmography, and there's very little in it where it's like, oh yeah, I would remember her from that. But like everybody else is playing this like almost on a comedy sort of level. Like it's just this side of serious. And there is even the son is kind of, it's a little bit more over the top, where she is playing this like it's a serious domestic drama. I mean, that is one of the things I liked about Rosemary's Baby, is that everyone is kind of taking it serious. Like I know I complained about that before, but just from an acting standpoint, right? Like everyone is treating that story like everything is actually happening. Whereas here, aside from her, everybody's treating it like, oh, we're in a religious horror movie and let's go crazy.
Yeah.
Let's let's play up the black comic sort of aspect of that. And she's not doing that at all. And that could be an interesting contrast, but there's just not enough time to really show it as anything but just kind of a mismatch.
I mean, I don't think the son is playing any comedy. I think some of it comes off comedic because
he's not great.
He's not great.
Fair enough.
Just like, I think the woman who plays
he's like angsty teenager guy.
Yeah. I think the woman who plays the principal or whatever was pretty good at delivering that sort of.
She's fun. It's just like
devilly stuff.
The tone of this is not fun.
Yeah, I know. I get it. I'm just saying, like, that's one of the people who I think it actually kind of pulls it off a little bit. But most of the performances, I think, including that mailman, are not very good.
The mailman's not great.
And so when you don't have that to sell it, it's very, very tough in a movie, in a short film like this, to really make it effective. You either have to go they have to be great. They have to be really all playing up. They got to be memorable. They got to be like Stephen King in that one Creep Show. Short word.
Stephen King should have done so much more acting.
I think we're all okay that he didn't do any more acting.
I wouldn't mind.
But yeah, I don't think it comes together very well. So I'm watching this and I'm like, man, I am so glad that we didn't decide to just do it about this, right? If we had just been like, let's stick to anything was released in a theater, and then we probably would have watched the whole thing, right? If that had been the case, if we weren't splitting this episode up between two things. But still, I was like, I'm really thankful that we're not going to end this, what was a pretty positive miniseries, on this, what I think was a kind of a stinker of a short film, right? Because after that, we got to watch the pilot of Yellowjackets, which is a Showtime original series that is heading into its third season now. Karyn Kusama is the executive producer, and she directed the pilot, and she also directed a couple episodes in the second season, and she will direct more in the third season as well. She's not the showrunner or anything like that. She didn't create the show. She didn't write the script, but she was brought on very early in the process of this to help with casting, and also, of course, to set the visual and sort of tonal direction of the show, because many times your pilot director for your TV show is going to do that, right? And then everyone else after that, unless you're doing a show that is very tonally pliant is going to follow along in a lot of ways with what the pilot director sets down on the table. So very important in TV to have a great, or at least a solid pilot director to get you that into those places, right?
And I will say, in terms of setting tone, this show does it like right away. And it's so unique and it's so well pulled off. Like, she was 100% the right choice for this. Like, I don't know what kept me away from the show. I've always heard it was good. It was always something where I was like, yeah, I got to check that out someday.
So before we break into it, I just want to say, because people might be listening to this and being like, oh, but this is not a TV podcast. I don't want you guys spoiling Yellowjackets for me. Nick, you've only watched the pilot, right?
I have, but I cannot wait to see more.
But I'm just saying, so I've watched the first 2 seasons of the show. So I pretty much know.
Spoil it for me then.
That's what I'm saying. Okay. I'm not going to spoil I'm not going to spoil anything that's outside the pilot, except for
agreed. Well, me either, because I can't.
Maybe saying like, and this performance continues its continuity afterwards, or this visual motif continues its way through there. I'm not going to talk about any story stuff that happens. This is a very much a, Lost-ish, very story dependent, lots of spoilers abound could happen type of show. Lots of flashbacks and going back and forth between modern day and the past.
So much better than Lost.
Lots of characters.
I wish you wouldn't always use that as your comparison.
Because Lost is one of the greatest shows ever made and one of the most influential shows ever made, Nick. I'm not going to argue about the pilot. I'm not going to argue about the finale or whatever. I don't want to get into the discussion with you right now, because we're going to talk about Yellowjackets, which is what this deserves to be talked about for a full show. But Lost changed the game when it comes to shows like this, serialized television like this. It made it a thing that was way more popular than it had been before. Like the sort of like mystery box, science fiction tinged, like very mystery heavy idea. Really had been done before, but was never as breakthrough mainstream popular as when Lost did it. Right. Also has one of the most influential pilots of all time, so, and also Nick, the comparisons to Lost are so obvious. It is about a group of people who plane crashes in a remote area and weird shit happens. So like that.
Okay, fine. Alive too. That was not,
but
no one remembers that movie.
Story about real people.
I was thinking Alive the whole time. Wasn't that a soccer team also? Yes.
That part of it is very similar. They were saying, in their inspiration, it was like the Donner Party thing was a big part of like what they used as inspiration for this.
And Lord of the Flies. It's kind of
very Lord of the Flies as well.
From what I have seen, and like really, there's not much of that in the pilot episode, but I definitely get the female Lord of the Flies vibe. Yeah, which is a great idea.
They don't spend a lot of time on the island in this first episode. The island in the place where they crash.
The smoke monster has infected your brain. I think
the place where they crash. The place where they crash and they flash back to and flash forward to throughout the show. Crazy that I would bring up Lost in this scenario. Okay, well,
This Is Us did that too. Can we compare it to that?
If you want to, sure. You can definitely compare it to that.
I don't. I didn't like that show either.
We can have a very real discussion about Lost at some other point, but
I don't want to. Let's just talk about Yellowjackets.
I'm not saying
fine. You're right. They have some similarities.
I'm not saying on the show. I'm saying in general. But anyway, and you have no idea if it's better than Lost. You've only watched one episode.
I think it's already better. It's already better. I'm putting I'm placing my bets right now.
Okay. All right, Nick. This is definitely one of your most basic opinions that I've heard so far.
That Lost sucks.
Yes.
I was a big fan of that show for a long time. I had some merch.
Basic opinion though.
Okay. Fine. Whatever. But as long as I have to watch it again, you can think whatever you want about me.
Oh, I don't. It's fine. I don't judge you for you not enjoying Lost. That's not what that was about. It's about the fact that like. All right, let's go to it. I just think I think that when people jump on stuff like Lost or stuff like that, it's just a shortcut, easy criticism without really digging into what I was saying about what the actual context I was bringing across was.
I don't know, but it's like when you compare something that is obviously so much better to something that failed so spectacularly,
but we disagree on this, right? I don't think it failed at all. Okay. I mean, I think obviously when you're dealing with 6 seasons of a network television show, there is bloat and chuff, especially back then, because you were dealing with longer seasons. So not all of it, I think, is A+ great, right? But
no, but I didn't think that. Even when I liked the show, I understood that. I just think that was a show that promised something, that promised it had a plan, and clearly, you know, over time revealed that it did not have a plan at all. Yellowjackets does not feel that, and I could be, maybe I am wrong, and this will also be a spectacular failure.
No, I'm not saying it's spectacular failure, but they definitely have. I will say this: like, if you listen to the creators and stuff like that, this idea of like having a plan, a long-term plan, I'd say a roadmap, right? That has dots along the way that they want to get to. I want to say that they're very clear about this. It's not like they know every single thing that's going to happen from here till the end of the show, but they have sort of like a loose sort of like blueprint of what they want to happen. But that was definitely a big part of their pitch for this show, was that it was going to have like an ongoing mystery that would eventually be solved. Right. So that's a big part of this show. And I think that this is all to say, like, we're not going to spoil the future of the show for anybody. This is only going to be about what's in the pilot. The pilot is really just, honestly, the setup for what the show is going to be. It is in a million senses, I think exactly what a pilot should and needs to be, which is, like I said, it sets the visual blueprint for the show.
Beautifully. Yeah.
Beautifully. It sets you up with all of the main players pretty much of what's going to come for this at least first season of the show, right? Or the first chunk of the first season of the show.
And very interestingly, right? Like this is unlike Lost, where the flashbacks were the same actors and we're talking about a couple of years or something like that. This is 2 different casts, and we meet the survivors, right? We meet the older characters and the younger version. There's obviously more of them in the flashback sequences. Yeah. But I mean, like, the amount of work that this pilot has to do and the effortlessness with which it does it is just kind of mind blowing to me. Like, this is, it's one of the best pilots I think I've ever seen. And
it's such a good pilot. It's an amazing pilot. I set up the story for people just so they know, if they're not watching Yellowjackets, might get them interested in watching it. Yellowjackets gets its name from the name of a soccer team, high school girls soccer team that is going to nationals. They, in 1993, right? Is that the year it is? Is that what they said?
1996.
1996, sorry.
It's 96 and 21, although all the period music, which I loved, is from like 93, 94.
It's like 15 years. That's what it's 15 years. That's what I couldn't remember if it was 15 years or 20 years. I couldn't remember what the jump was. So 1996, they're going to this the nationals for their soccer team, and the plane crashes and they end up marooned in it somewhere. And it splits time between those girls in 1996. And like Nick said, their adult versions in 2021.
Some of them.
We have 4 of them, I believe, in this that we are following, that we know basically made it out of the whatever happened to them when they were stuck in this place, right?
Yeah, and it's been like a very public sort of tragedy, People magazine, stuff like that. But nobody knows exactly. They were missing for 19 months. Yeah, which is a pretty long time to be stranded in the wilderness with nothing to eat and nothing, no shelter or anything like that. So, I saw this described somewhere as a psychological drama plus a survivor drama plus a couple of, it's like 4 or 5 different things that are not necessarily the most, like, the easiest thing to put together.
Are you okay?
Yeah, sorry.
Did you lose your mind for a second?
I did, yeah.
It sounded like you were going to keep talking, and that's why I didn't.
I think I was, and it's like I completely lost the thread.
I was like, oh, did we lose connection? Because you were just staring so still. Well, after you finished saying that.
my brain lost the connection, yeah.
I think...
You won't cut that out, sure.
No, I'll cut it out. I'll cut that part out. If we had a really funny joke that had come out of it, I would have left it in, but it wasn't funny enough to keep it in.
My stupidity is a funny joke, but it's a running gag, and I think we've already established it.
So that's the basics of what's happening here. Again, I know a lot more, obviously, than Nick does about what's to come, so I'm going to be very, very careful to not say anything that, gives away anything for future stuff. But, I will say that what is set up here and the mysteries that are set up here, I think you're going to be pretty happy with how things start to develop over the next couple of episodes. If you start watching it, if you keep watching it. But for this episode, we start right in the shit, right? And this is very classic TV, modern TV setup, right? Which is especially a mystery show, a show like this where we want to get you hooked right away. We go right into basically Snow, a girl running away, weird, whispery, something's happening in the background.
Very ominously shot, snowy forest. Yeah, it looks great.
It looks great. And this girl falls into a pit. And it seems like it's like a trap, right? It seems like an animal trap. She falls in and she gets impaled on all these sticks that have been sharpened to almost like spears. And, right away, what I love about this is they start to seed in little details, right? Little clues to you about maybe who this person is or who the people are who are approaching. So we see this little heart locket thing around this girl's neck who fell into the pit. And then the girl I guess we don't know it's a girl, but this figure who walks up to the pit is wearing these
this is incredible. Yeah.
Sneakers.
Like I think I knew right from the get go. I mean, I like that opening scene where the one girl falls into the trap. I mean, it's just pretty graphic, and it definitely has that horror vibe that I liked a lot. I mean, they're not pulling punches with stuff like that.
No.
And then, kind of what's cool about the mystery of the show is that we don't know who's who. They're all wearing like furs. They've covered themselves in this sort of cult-like sort of garb, and you could only see their eyes from it. So we see one of these figures approaching the trap, and she steps up. And then as the thing just sort of, whatever she's wearing, this pelt that she has on, as it sort of rises up just a little bit, she's got these like very girly pink Converse sneakers on. And I was like, oh shit, we're in for a good time here. This is going to be great.
Yeah.
Like, I think, as far as opening moments, I put it right up there with Breaking Bad, with the RV sort of barreling through the desert, plowing through the cow shit, and, the stuff rolling around in the back. Like, it's that good of an opening, and I don't compare many things to that. It's Tony Soprano seeing the ducks in the pool.
So, and then we kind of smash right into this voiceover, which ends up being almost looking like fake documentary sort of vibe, but it's actually a reporter asking questions to people about, about these girls who got lost. It's basically setting the table for you right away, going, what you just saw. And they'll keep doing this throughout the entire episode, which I think is so smart. Like, we're going to show you something crazy or something you don't quite understand. And then we're immediately going to smash to another scene, which is basically going to explain to you some of the context of what you have just seen, right? Which is,
but before we even get to that, right? Like, that's how densely packed and how awesome this pilot is, right? So we've got the flash forward, you want to call it, the scene in the woods. And then we get that documentary footage. And even there, right, we get the tone of the show, which is so unique, where it is a tragedy that they're talking about. This is, years after the fact, but this like dark humor that runs through this show, it's just, it gets me so much. Like, I enjoyed that so much. Like, already, the sneakers, that opening sequence was awesome. But then you get these like, the principal has this great moment where he's like, most kids, like, we don't really care what happens to them, but these girls, they were something special. They were going places. It's like that kind of very sort of hard edged, dark humor, this really satirical thing reminded me a lot. This reminded me very, very much of Jennifer's Body. It doesn't have that sort of Diablo Cody quirkiness, but it's like, if you strip that out a little bit and you're not going for those one-liners the way she does, but you still have that same sort of very cynical worldview and that same very cynical attitude toward things like high school and female relationships and stuff. This has it in such a cool way. And that's like, we're talking like 2 minutes into the show, 3 minutes into the show at this point.
It's also right, teaching you almost immediately to be prepared that what you think is going to happen is usually not what's going to happen, right? It's going to undercut a lot of your expectations of media like this, of characters like this, of performances like this, all throughout the show, right?
Yeah.
Maybe with a couple of
right away, like we know this is not going to be a reverent thing. We know that these characters are not going to be the most likable characters. Like they are very flawed. They can be very mean to one another. And I think that's a major, I don't know, but at least across the pilot, that's kind of the thing that I got. Even like there's an old lady who's like the math teacher. She's like, well, none of them gave a shit about trigonometry. Like, I love stuff like that.
Well, much like Jennifer's Body and The Invitation, right? Speaking of her sort of body of work, this idea of toxic but important friendships, I guess you would say, is very big in Yellowjackets. You can tell that right away, right? You're dealing with a whole group of teenage girls, so that you're kind of expecting that to be baked in, right? But it also exists in the adult versions in many ways. And, you know, what I like about this is that it's giving you this thing right off the bat, right? Where this girl dies and you're like, oh my God, like they're already showing that things were like really weird and bad. People wearing like, you know, weird fur pelts and whatever. That's not the reveal, but it's actually holding back more character reveals than it is, you know, what the overall sort of like mystery reveal would be, right? It's very much, very smartly, again, for a pilot, not only setting up the series, but also giving you little mini self-contained mysteries right within this one episode, right? This idea of who Shauna is married to, right, is sort of this mystery that's throughout the whole thing, which you don't even really realize is a mystery until you get really to the end of the episode, right? I really like that about it too. So we get this, you know, we basically so far though, in these first two scenes, we haven't seen the face of anyone who's a major player in the rest of the episode, right? Where we don't see who the girls are for the most part or at all in that opening scene in the woods. In this now modern day scene in 2021 with the reporter, we don't see anybody there that we really know, right? And then we are immediately sent back into the past, right? Back into 1996.
1996. Amazing needle drops throughout this episode. As I was mentioning, the period music, just so good. Starting off a show with all of that we just saw. And then Today by the Smashing Pumpkins, one of my all-time favorite songs.
Well, it's made for people who are our age, Nick. It's definitely squarely centered on that.
Absolutely. We get PJ Harvey in this. We get Liz Phair, like a scene or two later. I love it.
Yeah. Were you in or around high school in 1996? This is for you. Basically
pretty much.
Is basically what it's doing. And one of the things it does throughout the episode, and we'll continue to do this throughout the series in many ways, is if you notice, there's no visual differentiation between 2021 and 1996. They're not doing any different color palettes. They're not doing any effects. They're not doing anything like that, right? They're not nothing subtle or like crazy like Veronica Mars would do with flashbacks, where everything was like super overexposed and weirdly frame rated. None of that, right? But there's some very, very careful editing, right?
Yes. Like, so we know it's never confusing who we're seeing in the past and in the future, which is another pretty impressive thing this does.
And the music is a big part of this. Every time they switch back in this pilot between the time periods, there's some sort of needle dropper music playing to let you know this is the past, right? We're going back to the past. This is where you're existing. So we immediately now meet Jackie, played by Ella Purnell, who obviously now is kind of broken out big time in the Fallout show on Amazon Prime.
Yeah, like when that came out and she was like the talk of everything, I was like, I've never seen that person before. What's she been in before this? And now I know.
Yeah, she's in this, and she's automatically right. The show is very good at giving us the stereotype of who this character is pretty much immediately, so that it can then mess with it almost directly after, right? But they want to give you this idea. This is the popular girl. She's got the quarterback boyfriend, you know, all this kind of stuff. And we are going to now set the scene, right, for what's the status quo in 1996 for these girls, right? This is before the tragedy. Obviously, they're not in the woods in the snow. They're in high school,
Jersey.
Yeah, in a Jersey high school, and we have much following on from Destroyer. We've got another uncomfortable.
Yeah, that's another. It's a late career Karyn Kusama touchstone. Is uncomfortable sex scenes.
Uncomfortable sex scenes, specifically like some sort of masturbation.
Yeah,
tinge scenes.
They do those the IMDb. Those phrases like where if you search on them, it pulls up like every film. Like, I feel like if you put in hand stuff, Karyn Kusama's filmography is going to come up.
Uncomfortable hand stuff.
Uncomfortable hand stuff.
Is coming in. We immediately see, right, on Ella Purnell's character, the heart necklace that we saw in the opening. So immediately they're going, okay, is this the girl who we saw at the opening, right? Immediately they're starting to sort of put that into our minds. And then later in the episode, that necklace will change hands, right? And so then it's like, well, now is this person? So the show is already playing with it. A little bit of an inside baseball, because I listened to a lot of interviews with the creators and stuff after this first season came out, because I was so into the show. They were like, at that point, we weren't really sure who the girl was who fell in the pit. So we were like,
okay, because I kind of got that feeling, and it really feels like the kind of thing where it's like, you get to this scene, it's like, okay, you want to like rewind your DVR or whatever. Do people still call it that? I mean, it's not exactly that, but you hit rewind on your streaming service of choice and try to see if there is any shot where you can see that girl's face. But I think they're pretty careful about not showing it.
You definitely can't see the girl's face, because they were
I definitely did that.
Yeah, they didn't know who it was going to be, so they intentionally shot around what the look was, who the person was.
I got that impression pretty quickly. Yeah.
I mean, the show does a really good job in general of only showing characters when they absolutely have to and they absolutely know they need to use them, because they do have a lot of like, you'll never believe what actor is going to play this part in another season. They have like they're very smart about that, and very smart about casting in the future actors similar to the actors they're casting for the older characters here, which are all, once again, people that we've been watching on screen for 20 years, who we're like, oh, this person, I love this person. I had a huge crush on this person when I was a kid. Very good about that. And they're very good about in this as well. Right.
I got to tell you, really stupid on my part. There's a very famous actress in this show, and I knew she was in it. And I got to the end of the episode and I had to look it up. I was like, wait a minute, which one was she?
You didn't know which Christina Ricci you're talking
Christina
about?
Ricci, yeah.
She does have a crazy wig on her head.
It's the wig and the glasses or something. Glasses, and I thought I would have recognized her anywhere, but she's a long way from Wednesday on this show.
Oh yeah, for sure. So we get this uncomfortable hand stuff scene. And then we see Shauna, her friend, outside waiting for her. And again, we're getting told everything. We're getting told big amounts of information here without hearing anybody say anything, because we're taking our knowledge of movies and stories like this and sort of putting it on to this thing immediately, right? Popular girl with the jock boyfriend and her, what you're assuming is maybe a little more awkward, nerdy friend who's waiting outside and gives like an eye roll when she sees.
It's a very Jennifer's Body relationship, right?
Exactly. It is very Jennifer's Body
Megan
relationship.
Fox and Amanda Seyfried.
Yes.
Kind of. Sorry. I mean, they're both a little bit, I don't know, like the Ella Purnell's character is a little bit more likable.
Yes. Well, it's very quickly we're taken away from that, but we're sort of given that as shorthand, right? We're also given this idea, like, I think very explicitly and on purpose, does Shauna have some sort of crush on Jackie, right? Because there is a little bit of like lingering looks and kind of exhaustion with Steve, the boyfriend,
Jeff.
and Jeff.
Yeah. Well, right. It's like she definitely has a thing for one of them, and it seems more like it's Jackie.
Yes, exactly. And we then are sort of. But we're going to flash forward again, right, to modern day Shauna, and the show is so good at casting. It's so good at also big credit to the hair and makeup people, obviously, but there is no doubt in your mind when you go forward in time that this is older Shauna, right? Yep. There is just no doubt. They cast Melanie Lynskey first, and then they cast the young actors off of the older actors, right? So they did a great job with that. But it's not only the way they look, it's also just like their energy is very similar almost immediately. And we get another uncomfortable hand stuff scene immediately where it seems like,
for those of you keeping score.
Yeah. Shauna is, diddling the ones and twos to a picture of what seems like you're guessing her daughter's boyfriend, because it is like a much younger guy than she is.
A prom picture. Yeah.
A prom picture. So yeah.
Melanie Lynskey, what a great actress, kind of wasted for a very long time on Two and a Half Men, but casting her in anything, she elevated that show. I felt like everything she does, going all the way back to Heavenly Creatures and stuff like that. She is an absolute treasure. And the fact that this show is using her, and again, I've only seen an hour of it, but what a great role for her. And she just this sort of repressed suburban kind of, I don't know how I would describe the character. It's kind of unhappy mom that has all this trauma that we at least are starting to get a sense of at this point of the show. Perfect casting there, I think.
Yeah, she's amazing. She'll be amazing throughout it, so you don't have to worry about that. Great character for her, great everything for her. Again, what I love is she looks a certain way, and you would assume she was going to be she has a fragility to the way she looks and sort of presents herself, right? And then almost immediately you realize, no. This woman is scary a little bit, right?
She's capable of some stuff, yeah.
Yeah, because that reporter comes to see her that we saw in the opening, and she basically turns from oh, I don't know, do I know you, to get the fuck out of here in just a turn of an eyelash, right? It's pretty crazy. And we get to meet a couple of our grown-up characters here, right? We get Shauna as Melanie Lynskey as Shauna. She sees Thaisa on television, running for state senate of New Jersey. And we also get to meet grown-up Natalie, who is played by Juliette Lewis. And there has never been, I don't think, another actress like Juliette Lewis. If anyone's playing close to, I guess, type in this, it's definitely her. But
Melanie Lynskey in some senses too, but they're both so good at playing those kind of characters. Yeah, neither one of them is doing the Christina Ricci thing.
That wasn't an insult to her.
No. They're both great at what they do. I really liked. I didn't know Juliette Lewis was even in this, and I was like, oh, that lady looks a lot like Juliette Lewis, and it was a nice surprise that it actually was her.
Yeah,
really interesting character too on both ends of the timeline.
And we get this great cut back to sort of, she's in this therapy session, and we get this kind of smash back to the 1996 era where we meet, younger Natalie. I should say young Shauna is played by Sophie. I don't know if it's Nelise or Nelise. And Sophie Thatcher plays young Natalie, the Juliette Lewis character, who is great. All the young characters, people are great. Jasmine Savoy Brown plays young Thaisa, who she was in the most recent 2 Scream movies. She's one of the core 4, she's Randy's cousin. Or did you see the new Scream movies?
I have not seen the new Scream movies.
Oh, okay. All right. 5, okay. 6, I thought was fantastic, actually. The best one probably since the second one, I would say. Maybe the first one. She's great in those. She's great in this as well. But what did you think of kind of our establishment of Natalie as this kind of person who has a substance use problem that has basically been going on since she was a kid, assuming?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a stock character, but I do think that the performances make it seem a little, I mean, we all knew a kid like that. And, the way they cut back to her where it is just kind of a fun thing. She's hanging out with these 2 stoner guys, this dude in the Marilyn Manson t-shirt. I mean, again, the period details here, it really is, the show is so much really directed toward people of our generation.
Yeah.
With just the little touchstones, just the nice little things, the memories of a better time that I think almost everyone agrees was a better time. But she's drinking something in a brown bag with these two, the loser kids at school, and somebody's got a joint and somebody's trying to go get LSD and stuff like that. And yeah, I mean, it's like, I guess it's kind of a cliche in movies where the kid who just does sort of fun, very common teenage stuff like that ends up later on in rehab. But then I think when we learn a little bit more about the character later, it seems, like there's like she's not doing drugs, it's just sort of as a fun thing, but she lives in a trailer. She's got kind of a rougher life than some of the other girls in the show. So yeah, I don't know. I don't think there was one moment in this episode that was just like, I don't buy that, which is suspension of disbelief gets harder and harder for me the older I get. And I feel like this really, it is the tone of this, as I said before, it is pitched like almost on the edge of comedy. And like you could have done this. I think if you took like one more step, this still would have been a really cool show if it was just a straight up like dark comedy. Like, what was the one? There's a cannibalism show. I think Timothy Oliphant was in it.
Oh, it's not a cannibalism show. You're talking about the Santa Clarita Diet?
Yeah. What was that about?
She's like a zombie.
I thought it was the diet was eating people. I don't know.
It is, but it's because she's a zombie. I believe that's the whole premise of that show.
Well, anyway, I maybe like I could have seen the show going in that direction too, but it is just dark and just serious enough where it's not quite that. And I don't know. I find this a little more engrossing than that.
Yeah. I mean, this is like you were saying before, this is top shelf stuff. This whole season doesn't let go of the gas pedal the entire time, right? What you're getting here is just an appetizer to what the whole thing is going to be. And it does such a great job of setting up all of those factors. Like Juliette Lewis monologue that she's giving in this therapy session, right? Where she's getting out of rehab.
About how she's finally found purpose.
Yeah. And, she talks about, how on the island she had purpose and then finding her purpose. And then we get a really creepy flashback, right? Because throughout this thing, we're getting more of that opening sort of tease about the girl dying throughout, right? So there's a great shot of that body getting dragged through the woods. Is that what you're talking about? Yeah. The body getting dragged through the woods, her getting gutted.
Gigantic hole and then hung up and gutted. Absolutely. The hole in her foot.
And then ends up with them all like all these people wearing furs and antlers and weird sort of like animal costumes chowing down on people steak or whatever with one leader in the middle, right? There's definitely a leader in the middle and there's definitely like a group of people around that leader, right? But again, that's left completely up to mystery, right? About who is in that group, except for the very end when we get one reveal, right?
And I love about this what you were saying before, right? Like that the mystery is not that they resorted to cannibalism. It's just like who is who and who is the one who's kind of in control, whose idea was it? And that is a much smaller thing than the fact that they did what they did. But like the fact that we get that right away and that's not going to be a big reveal. I mean, that takes a lot of guts, I think, from a writing standpoint. Like, we really do. I think Karyn Kusama does a great job directing this episode, and the tone is perfect, and the pacing. She's been always, I think, pretty good with pacing. Like a lot of this, the montage in Jennifer's body at the beginning, set to Black Kids, that song. I really liked that, and this whole episode feels like that, like an extension of that. But the writing on this is phenomenal, also. So I like.
Oh yeah,
and
Ashley Lyle and Bart Nickerson.
Yeah. Fantastic stuff. So I like as much credit as I want to give Karyn Kusama for this. We got to give them some props too, because like every scene here is it just crackles. It's awesome.
Oh, of course. Yes. The writing is phenomenal. Right. Absolutely. And they do a great job throughout the whole season of doing that. But I will say, like, I think a lot of the choices that Kusama makes in the framing and the editing choices and the shot composition really lend to enhancing what is on the page and making it hit home. Because there are ways that going from this 1996 to 2021 could be jarring, it could be confusing, it could be corny, all of these things could happen, right? And
you have that like transitional sound effect, like, not to dump on Lost, but Lost did it in like kind of an obvious way, which it needed to. Like, it was a complicated show and it was trying to hold your hand a little bit. This show doesn't necessarily do that. Like, you do have to put a little bit more effort into sort of following it, but it does it in a way that's so interesting. Like, you can't not want to figure it out, right?
Yeah, exactly. And they're very smart to lay out, like we were saying, that idea of like this crazy thing is going to happen. And then throughout the entire show, it adds a lot, especially let's just talking about this episode, even lends an air of you feeling a little out of sorts the whole time, because you can't help but think, but how did we get here? But like these girls, yeah, they have like some toxic behavior between them, whatever, but they don't seem like they're capable of doing this thing that I saw, right?
No, they're pretty common, regular high school kids.
Yeah.
I think we're past this point already, but the scene where she meets with Thaisa, who is now, running for Senate or whatever, and she, Shauna, old Shauna or adult Shauna calls her, they meet in a diner, and it's one of those very typical conversations on a show like this, right? Like, are we going to talk about this now? Like, what if people find out, like one of those kind of, noir things?
Yeah.
Like this can't be like, you were on television. I saw your ad on television today. And how are you going to expose yourself? If people start digging, they're going to find out what we did, very ominously, that phrase, what we did. That's a great scene too, because it's a scene we've seen 1,000 times before, but you've got these great actors playing it. And I don't know, I was definitely engrossed by that.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a charged scene between the two of them, because even though they're doing something like you said, we've seen in a lot of noir stories before, they're generally playing it differently than you normally see in those episodes, those type of stories, I'm sorry. And I love that the ending of that conversation, Shauna comes into it very hot, very like, you got to take care of this shit. And then she says some very interesting stuff where she goes, have you heard from any of the others? Or she goes, where's Natalie? She goes, she's in rehab again. And he goes, have you heard from any of the others? And immediately you're like, wait, who are the others? Like, who are the people who are still alive, right? Who are the other people I don't know about, who you're not mentioning, who could still be around, right? Because it could just be Misty, right? Who is the next person we kind of see, which again, the show is very good, scripting wise, very good at basically leading you from place to place, right? And going, we're going to give you a little bit of a like tease. And then we're almost immediately going to turn the key and show you like who maybe we're talking about. Right. And that next person is Misty. We get a little bit of Misty in the flashbacks. She's a super fan of the Yellowjackets. She's like the equipment manager. Yeah. Very overeager. She goes like crazy at this pep rally. By the way, I love the pep rally where people are like, they have their shitty baseball team, which they set up earlier, where they're like, why are they giving them a sign? Like they were shitty all year. And then they're out there and they do that. One of, like you're saying about the tone, goes, let's hear it for the boys baseball team. And people are like, yeah. And the principal goes, they did their best.
That principal, like, he's got to come back, right? Is there more of him after this episode?
I don't really remember, to be honest with you. I'm sure there's more stuff school based. So
I really enjoyed that. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. This episode is interesting because a lot of it's set in high school and on the soccer field. It's before they leave for nationals and everything. There's a practice that's pretty consequential. And like, this could be such a good high school show, but it's not really a high school show. Like, by the end of this episode, we're lost in the woods. Yes, absolutely. But I like the school dynamics going on. I like, again, we're in a little bit of this. Yeah, me too. I mean, it's like a movie. It's kind of, it's a little Jennifer's Body and microcosm kind of thing. I love this kind of little bit of a fantasy world where these kids are like super into the girls soccer team. They're like going crazy for it. Everybody, they're a national caliber girls soccer team. I know, but we had teams in our like school that would go to these things, and never was I excited to go to pep rally, no matter what it was. You know what I mean? Well, it helps that they're all hot. It's true. It's absolutely true. It's absolutely true. The show, like, I forgot what the line was, but it's something like that too. Like, what's this pep rally all about? It's just something for the boys to jerk off to. Oh yeah, that's what Ella Parnell's character says. Yeah, because she says, "Don't be nervous about the pep rally." Again, very very Jennifer's Body, very Diablo Cody kind of moment. So one little hint we do get of like, well, maybe we can start to understand the beginnings or the origins of this Lord of the Flies thing is the girls talking about this freshman who has been playing like this kind of almost should be on the JV team, but is on their team. And she's kind of the weak link, right? She played really bad at states and they want to make sure she doesn't get the ball. And so they're going to kind of freeze her out. Right.
And so during the scrimmage, Thaisa basically goes to the other switches sides with one of the JV players during the scrimmage to, basically scare the girl, right? The girl who's kind of bad.
This scene is so good. I mean, it's nice looking. Karyn Kusama, she's a good director, can shoot a soccer scene and have it be like dynamic and look cool. But the fact that we never really know, and I'm sure we'll find out later in the show, but we don't find out in this episode. So Thaisa's kind of pushing her around a little bit and basically says to her, like, you got to play. Like, the other team is going to play this way. You got to toughen up.
Yeah.
And then delivers this kick to her that very gruesomely, like, breaks her leg.
Yeah. And as much gore as I see in things, I cannot take the bone out of the
bone
skin
sticking
thing.
out. Yeah. And it's the actors react to that really great too.
Yeah.
It's nicely done. One of them throws up afterward and says she's going to throw up like hours later when they're talking about it in the locker room. But like the fact that we never really get a sense of what Thaisa, like how far she'll go. There's so much of that in this whole episode. And like that savagery that we know these characters eventually are going to be capable of, but like, who's the one? So is she, was it a mistake? Because she said that someone confronts her about it later. And she said, well, I didn't mean to. I didn't go out there planning to like fuck her up like that, but she definitely does. And the way I can't even describe it. It's such a quick moment. But like, you can't really tell. Like, you don't really even know in the moment who's doing it, who's delivering that kick. And I thought that was really nicely done also.
Yeah. And
like, this could be so, just like with the girl in the opening scene, right? Like, it could be so obvious that like, we're not showing you who this is. Haha, fooling you. But like, it never really does that, right? Like, it is doing that, but it's doing that in a way that's kind of subtle and very just well articulated so that you don't see the gears spinning, right?
Yeah, and it immediately gives you this idea of like, all these people, they're close, they're friends, but when they're doing the plan at first about excluding, the one girl, there are people who aren't about it, right? There are people that leave the kind of go like, I can't do this, it's not right. People they want to exclude from that plan or they don't think will be in on that plan. Funny enough, right? Shauna is the one who stays and is like, okay, but how are we going to do this?
Yeah.
Right. And then is the first one, though, when something goes wrong, to be like, you're a terrible person. Why did you meant to do this? You did this on purpose, even though she was all up on the plan to exclude this girl from the team because of how she plays. Right.
Shauna is so interesting, too.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, because she is, she's supposed to be kind of the audience surrogate, right? Like, she is the one that we're supposed to like. But, she's not the prettiest. She's not the best at soccer. She like doesn't really stand out in any other way. But like, she is clearly capable of some pretty messed up stuff, too. And I like that, like this show doesn't give us an obvious like, OK, this is a character that you want to root for the entire time.
Yeah.
Like, no. I don't know what happens from here on out. But if Shauna ends up being like the big bad, like the major villain in this show, that's a direction it could go in.
I can tell you the show, to its credit, doesn't take the direction of let's give you an obvious villain, right? Of these girls to really dislike.
Well, it's not over yet.
Fully. But I'm just saying, like, even the next episode, the next 3 episodes, the show is very
no.
This is a complicated.
Like, sure, it's planting
situation.
A lot of seeds, but I think eventually, just from what I know about these types of TV series, there's going to be a reveal that like someone that we've been following all along and hopefully the seeds are planted there. But like, it's interesting that there's none that's just so obviously not going to be that. Yeah.
I mean, Shauna's messed up. We get that completely in this first episode, right? We get the idea that she kills that rabbit at the end or whatever.
That was pretty brutal too.
It's very brutal.
This show does not fuck around.
No, not at all. And it has no problem making you uncomfortable. It has no problem
they're
making you
eating
a
a
little
lot of
squeamish.
human meat. And it just in this first episode, like they show it. It's not like one of those things that, like, I remember Alive. I think I saw that movie when I was a kid. It came out when I was in like 4th grade or something. And I remember watching that. It's like, oh, this is going to be a gore fest, but it's mostly off screen. And this is like, nope, we're going to eat some log pig and we're going to do it right in front of you.
Yeah. I will say, having watched all these Kusama movies, there are definitely visual touches in here that I can very much tell are hers. Those centered close-ups where the character's basically almost staring down the barrel of the camera, all but looking directly through the camera, happen a bunch in this. When young Natalie is looking at that fire when she's on the LSD and she sort of like sees Misty like across the way or whatever, and she disappears.
A great little road trip sequence in this episode.
Yeah. And this idea, there's a lot of those center close-ups like that. You know, the soccer scene reminded me, the way it was shot and sort of built, reminded me a little bit of the way she would shoot the fights in Girl Fight. You know, the plane crash that we're going to get to, it's very much shot, much like that bank robbery scene in Destroyer, all from Shauna's perspective, right? You don't get everything that we see in that scene is only things that Shauna can see.
Yeah.
Right? There is nothing else.
She's on Valium or something through that scene. Yes. And it's this kind of like narcotized
nightmare
haze of,
That is one of my top nightmare situations is waking up like that.
Waking up from being drunk on a plane and the plane's going down.
Yeah, absolutely. Really, really. Like when she opens the window.
Yeah.
And the tree line is right there.
The trees are just flying by the window. Yeah.
Yeah. So fucking scary, visual. Man. So scary. And her watching that, you know, looks like one of the coaches or whatever, like flopping around in the aisle, like trying to get to like a seat or something.
Okay. Like even just a little detail like that. I've never seen it. How many plane crashes and how many movies have you seen? And like, that's probably what happens if a plane is going down, is someone's trying to like gain their footing and they can't, and they're just flopping around like a rag doll. Like, this was so good. This might be my favorite thing we've watched on this show thus far.
It is really, really great. This is also the scene where they pass the necklace, right? Where you're kind of like, okay, like maybe I don't know what's going on. We also get, before this, right, we get the final reveal of Shauna and Jeff are basically having an affair, I guess. You are cheating, you know, he's cheating on...
Can you call it in high school?
I don't know,
Whatever the high school version of that is,
Yes. She's cheating with Jeff on Jackie, you know, and...
Which is nicely set up earlier in the episode. Again, this writing is just killer, right? Like where Jackie kind of says to her, like, well, we're both going to stay virgins. Like it's something, there's like, she has this very sort of self-righteous thing about that. And Shauna just sort of offhandedly says, how do you know he's a virgin?
Yeah.
Like, well, we've been together since freshman year. You know, that like
she's naivety
like, is great there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then she's banging him in a car, like after this party. After she's had like a nice emotional moment with Jackie, like when they're driving home. It's all very carefully constructed, very smart.
You're my best friend. I love you. All this kind of stuff. They do that, I think, really nice scene where, you know, the coach sort of tells the Jackie character, you know, you're not the best player on the team by any stretch of the imagination. I love that scene. Again, it's another like
this is supposed to be a pep talk.
Yes.
You basically suck, but you have leadership qualities, so you need to be a leader. Yeah.
And she does that. She tries that in the locker room and she fails miserably after the girl gets hurt, right? People are like, will you shut up? Like, this girl just broke her leg. We don't want to hear but we're still a team stuff. But when she kind of is more herself and does the thing where she's like, everyone's like, got to say something nice to the other, everyone else, or we're, you know, or we're not leaving this spot or whatever. And we get a nice scene between all of them where, you know, they're not all saying, what I like about it is they're not being like, and you're just a great person. Like they kind of say kind of weird stuff. I love that Natalie says to, oh my God, what Dottie? Is that her name? What's her name?
Lottie, the Risco, the tall one. Yeah.
The Lottie. You only talk shit about people when they really deserve it.
That's a really nice thing to say, actually.
Yeah.
I wish someone would say that about me.
Really, really good, right? And, you know, Lottie is one of the ones that we get a little bit of backstory on just visually at the end, right? She's taking these pills. And
her maid is giving her those pills. Yeah, she's it's her father that charters the private plane to fly them to nationals. Yeah, like that's a character we've seen, and she actually looks a little bit like Jackie, which makes it a little bit visually confusing. But yeah, we do get a sense of who she is. Like she kind of is given short shrift through this episode. I'm assuming we'll see more of her later.
Yes,
and
for sure.
What's the religious one? There's one that's like kind of a Bible thumper.
Becky Lee? Becky Lee? Is
something Lee. Yeah. Laura Lee.
Laura Lee.
Yeah.
Yes, Laura Lee. Yes. So what I really like about this pilot too, and this is me knowing how the season progresses, and obviously you're going to get to know all these characters. It's a season of television. You're going to spend a lot of time with any of the characters who survive, right? The initial crash.
Yeah, and if some of them are just kind of left off screen a lot, then that's going to derail the mystery. So I could see that they'll get more screen time, and
they really focus on this, right? On those sort of like on Shauna, Jackie, Thaisa, and Natalie, with a little bit of Misty at the end, right?
Yeah.
They focus on those characters here, I think, just because they're kind of trying to tell you like, we're only going to give you the characters we're going to show you in the modern day right now, right? And those are the characters we're going to focus on in the 1996 timeline for right now, so we can give you an anchor for the characters you can focus on for the show, so you're not overwhelmed with having to feel like you have to know, 15 characters. We'll give you a little bit of the coach, the hot assistant coach,
and his family, and
everyone fawns over, and then the head coach
also, like, this establishes the tone really. Like, I guess we have to, I can't not compare it to Lost, but like Lost did this well. I'll give it credit for this, right? Where very early on you learn that Lost, like every episode was going to be about a different character, right? Like this is a Locke episode. This is a Jack episode. This is a Sawyer episode. I like the Sawyer episodes. This one, clearly the show is not going to do that, right? Like we are going to be kind of jumping back and forth between different perspectives, which I think is more interesting. I mean, Lost did that well, although I like this approach a lot better because it is an ensemble thing. And the fact that the big reveal at the very end of the show, like what's in the mystery box, well, it has to do directly with the character relationships, who is in control of who, or who is deceiving who, stuff like that. I think it's a great way to do that.
It's also interesting because it's inversed, right? It's the modern day is them, quote unquote, saved, right?
Yeah.
And the past is them in danger, right? So you are able to say to yourself, well, I know they get out, at least Shauna and whoever get out of this danger somehow. Like what they come out from, how unscathed or scathed they are, we're going to see as we go along. Obviously, Shauna's messed up. She's killing animals and she's kept all these diaries, which I thought was a really good reveal, right?
In her safe, in the closet.
Yeah. Sure. And all the, reading she has a burner phone she uses to call Thaisa. So you get this sense, right, that there is a lot going on and there has been years and years of subterfuge that are happening because they don't even really stay in contact with each other, right? It's not like she has to meet Thaisa sort of clandestinely. Like it's not like they can just go out and meet, at a regular time in front of everybody. There is some built-in stuff happening here, right? That we're supposed to try to decode a little bit. What was I going to say? The other thing I was going to say was, right. So the end is when we really get our Misty sort of reveal, right? And this is, I think, the show very smartly being like, okay, we've given you a lot of people in hoods, people you can identify. We're not going to leave you without giving you a little, not just a breadcrumb, a little bit of meat off the turkey, right? Yeah. We're going to give you something, which is you meet grown-up Misty, played by Christina Ricci, who works in a nursing home and is a real fucking piece of work. You get it right away, right?
Well, so is that patient that we see her with.
Yes, but she takes away this patient's morphine, who's obviously in terrible pain, right? The people when she's leaving, she's like, happy Friday, girls, or whatever. And they're like, hey, Misty. Like, obviously problematic, right? The people do not like her.
She hasn't gotten popular over time.
Well, because there's that moment right when the girl breaks her leg, she comes running over and tries to help, and they're like, get the hell out of here.
That was great. Yeah, I forgot about
that. And such a good job of such in little amount of time, right? You get the scene where she's freaking out when the team comes out, where she's a super fan, right? So you can tell she's like obsessed with these girls, right? You can tell that she is like over eager to be important, right?
Yeah, this is an in crowd that she's never getting into.
Yeah. And then when she's older, you can tell she got some issues, right? And we quickly learn that Natalie is spying on her for some reason. We don't know why, right? But she did say the thing about having a purpose, right? So now she's spying on Misty. And then we are given this flashback to, basically this Last Supper-esque, cannibalism scene with everybody faces covered, except as they all walk away, one of them takes off their mask and it's Misty, the young Misty underneath it. And she looks like pretty psyched, to be honest with you. She does not look like bummed about what she just did. Which I think it's just great giving you these little nuggets, right? Like you said, Laura Lee, the religious girl, obviously that's going to come into it in some way, right? Going forward, right? Having someone who's super religious in the situation like they're going to be in is going to cause some friction, right? You get a little bit of friction earlier, right? When the assistant coach is like, it's just a scrimmage, Laura Lee. We don't have to do a prayer, or whatever. And he's like, okay.
Well, she asked the coach, right? Like, aren't we going to pray before this?
Yeah. you get the little bit of, like we said, of Lottie, right? She's on some sort of medication, right? It's like one pill in the morning. You get this kind of sense like, okay, what is that pill? Like what? And she's going to be crashed on an island or an island in the woods. What does that mean for this medication that she's taking? What is that going to lead to? These little things throughout, right? That poor new freshman girl who had to come be on the plane with them, take the place of the girl who broke her leg, ends up getting crashed into this wilderness. She didn't even need to be, she wasn't even supposed to be there.
Yeah. We don't, they call her JV. She never gets a name, right?
No, she doesn't get a name.
In this episode. I don't know what beyond this. Yeah.
I will tell you, this is not me spoiling anything. I don't remember if she survives. I think she does. Through the plane crash. I mean,
well, we don't even see the plane crash in this episode, right? We see it like pretty close to it, but we never get up to that point. So obviously not everyone's going to survive that, but it's a little cagey about who does, who doesn't. And then we get a great scene where Natalie in the present picks up her car and goes in the trunk, and there's a sniper rifle in there.
Oh
that was almost where I was like, okay, like you're giving me all this cool stuff. Now we got a sniper rifle too. Like, it's too much.
So what I will say is knowing where the show's going to go, what they're trying to tell you, right, is don't think that the modern day story is just like an addendum to the story of the
No, they're not going to be just rehashing what happened, but like they still have a purpose. She's found her purpose again. Yeah. And I think they all kind of need to do that. They're all in these like, kind of holding patterns. And you can definitely tell that. That's a good point, right? Like another thing that I like about this is that we know, we're not going to be bummed out when we go to the present set scenes, that like, it's just going to be exposition dumps, but like there is actually some thrust, some purpose to it.
Yeah. The best thing about this show is that no matter which timeline you're in, you're always amped and you're waiting for you're looking for answers to questions that you have in both timelines, which is really, really smart writing and really well constructed by them.
Yeah. They play off each other really nicely.
The performances across the board in this thing are fantastic. The direction is great. It's such a great setup to the show. It reminded me, I was like, oh, right, this show rules. Like when I was watching it, because I've obviously seen it all, but I was like, oh man, I forgot like how much it rules, how much this show rules. And I really had forgotten that the pilot ended where it did. In my brain a little bit, I thought it ends after the plane crash. You see like you have some sort of like stinger like after the crash. But now once I was like, oh, right, and if you let the thing run, basically the next episode picks up exactly where this episode leaves off.
I can't wait to see it. I'll be honest, like if not for the fact that I kind of want my wife to see this now too, like I definitely want her to see it, but I want to watch it with her. So I was like, I will for her, I guess, because I think she's going to really dig it. But like, if I was not quite as good of a guy as I am, I would literally end my conversation with you and put on episode 2 like right now. I won't do it though.
I'm looking forward to, as you watch it, I want you to message me and how you feel about reveals. There's a couple 100%. Of reveals. The finale is so good, and there's like reveals in the finale, and I literally was like screaming like about how good the reveals were. But this show, I watched this show. I heard about it on a podcast I was listening to. Was like, it was actually a video game podcast, but one of the people who is on it is like a big horror person, and so when they talk about stuff like this, not this straight horror, but stuff like this, I always kind of look up because they're a big Stephen King person, blah, 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 whatever. I feel like it's like of a piece, right? And
yeah, well, this is horror adjacent for sure.
For sure, yes, yeah. But it has like that very Stephen King, like all these characters. We're dealing with 2 timelines. We're dealing with like how the past never really leaves you. All these big themes, right? That he deals with all the time. And so I watched it.
Yeah, it's a little bit of an It story, isn't it?
It is a little bit of an It story, yeah.
I didn't think that till just now.
And I watched it. I devoured it. Like, I think the first like 5 or 6 episodes were out when I started watching it, and then I had to wait. No, the first 9 episodes were out, and the 10th episode hadn't come out yet. The finale hadn't come out yet, so I watched it all like in like a week, and then watched the finale, and I was like, I have became an evangelist for the show. Every person I knew, I was like, you have to watch this show. You don't
I'm in
understand.
the process. Yeah, I'm getting there myself. My wife is just the beginning. Yeah.
Yeah. It was my wife first. I was like, because I watched it all and I was like, babe, I was like, you need to watch this show. I was like, you're going to love this. There's no doubt in my mind. And then like the next day I came home from work and she was like 5 episodes deep into it. And she was like, I haven't stopped watching it. I'm like, amazing. All of my friends, I was like, you guys got to watch the show. Like it's like all these other things that we've talked about that we loved. You got to watch it. And it was just like, became a thing with my group of friends for a while. Cause it just, this first season, the second season is interesting and like, it's still great, but it's a very different thing than this first season. The first season is just so propulsive. You'll see as you watch it. It's just great. And this is just a great setup for it. You know, the show is sold on this, right? You watch this and you know, I don't know why you would be out, but you watch this and you go, I'm in, right? Like this is, I want to see what happens here. And it does its job so well. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I can't wait to see more of it. And I really do think, I mean, I enjoy the shit out of this. Like I won't say it's the best thing Karyn Kusama's ever done, but like what a perfect choice of director and material. I think she handles it really, really nicely. Yeah. As I was mentioning, she is mostly working in television now, but like she really, I mean, it's a very cinematic show in a lot of ways. And I think it's like, this is the kind of thing where you want to hire somebody who knows how to make movies, who knows how to sort of tell those bigger scale stories with a bigger budget and make things look visually dynamic and just sort of have that cinematic flair to them. I don't think this would work. Like I could see a lot of like less good versions of this show. And I think that's probably what kept me away from it for so long was I was just like, I know I'll probably like it. I didn't really have a sense of how good it was actually going to be. And I was like, yeah, I think I kind of know what that is. And it's so much better. I never thought it was going to be a bad show, but I always kind of had a feeling it's like, this is like solid prestige TV and I'll get to it someday. And now I'm like, okay, this is the best thing I've seen in forever.
Yeah. First season is now on Netflix. If people want to watch it, literally just came to Netflix too, which is crazy timing for when we're recording this. Obviously people are gonna be hearing this weeks from now. So I'm assuming it's still there.
Third season's coming in 2025.
Yeah. It's on Paramount Plus or Showtime, if you want to watch the second season or if you have one of those subscriptions. So, you're able to check it out. The most common obviously is Netflix. So if you have it, then it's there. You can watch the whole first season on Netflix right now. So yeah, that's Yellowjackets and Her Only Living Son. And that.
Oh yeah. We talked about that before, didn't we?
We did. And that officially ends our Karyn Kusama miniseries. Very excited about it. If you obviously probably listened to all of them, but we ranked them last week. If you want to listen to those rankings, next week we start up. Next week we will start up. Next week we'll start up Gone Baby Gone and our Ben Affleck miniseries. So
we're going to Boston.
Prepare for really bad Boston accent impressions from me. I can't speak for Nick.
No, I'm definitely going to do it. How could you not? Like, I'm going to try not to. I will make a concentrated effort to not do a terrible Boston accent. I am a New Englander, lifelong New Englander, but we can't help it.
Yeah. Casey Affleck, Morgan Freeman, Ed Harris.
Michelle Monaghan.
Amy Ryan, right?
Yeah, what a cast. What a movie.
Oscar nominated for this film, I believe, right? She got an Oscar nomination for this film. I saw a really funny, speaking of Casey Affleck, and they'll leave us on this, a really funny quote about Interstellar, a really funny Letterboxd review about Interstellar, which just said, you would cry too if your son grew up to be Casey Affleck. Well, that's going to do it for the Intrepid Filmographers for this week. Please subscribe to the podcast on any of your podcasting platforms of choice. IntrepidFilmographers.com is the Substack we have. You can subscribe to the newsletter there. So when any podcast comes out, you'll get a notification. We'll put videos there, maybe articles, that's the place to collect everything. You can also subscribe to the podcast there, like as a shortcut. So, if you don't want to search on any of the services, there's links on there as well. Leave a rate and review us. It really, really helps. It's really, really important for podcasts to get rate and reviewed. So any ratings, any reviews would be extremely helpful. And we're going to keep doing this. We're going to on to Ben Affleck, for five movies. I believe.
Movies.
5 movies and a little bonus episode. And then we'll move on from there. But until then, thank you, Nick.
Thank you, Bobby.
And thank you to everybody who is listening. Until next time, be good to one another. Later.